When Mahmoud Ahmadinejad talks about a world without America not only being desirable but achievable, he could mean probably one thing, and that is what's known as a strategic electromagnetic pulse attack.
An electromagnetic pulse weapon is essentially a nuclear weapon that is exploded in the atmosphere up above. It doesn't hit the ground, it's exploded up in the air. It sends out pulse waves, shock waves.
You have to understand what this pulse is. It's tremendously high energy. Every wire will pick up this pulse, take the energy, and burn out whatever's at the end.
An EMP weapon, meaning a small nuclear bomb, detonated above the center of the United States would literally take down the entire power grid of this country.
Not only would the power grid be out, it would be out for probably months, but every piece of electronics that we use, from pacemakers to phones to cars to gasoline pumps to water pumps, would all be fried.
The Blue Ribbon Commission established by the Congress concluded that this was an eminently achievable way of effecting catastrophic effects on the United States, specifically devastating the electrical grid of this country, and with it all of the infrastructures that depend upon it: food, water, sewage, medical, commercial, financial, transportation.
And here we go.
North Korea looks certain to face UN sanctions after this week's nuclear test. The UN Security Council powers have agreed in principle that North Korea must face sanctions for defying an earlier UN resolution put in place after its previous nuclear test in October 2006. The reclusive North has shocked the world with a series of provocative moves unseen since the 1950 Korean War, including war threats, missile launches and a nuclear test.
The US and Israel will resort to attacking Iran over its nuclear program if pressed hard enough. That's according to the chief of the General Staff of Russia's armed forces. Speaking at a press conference, he said such hard measures would be devastating for regional and international stability and cannot be allowed.
A group of former CIA and military officials have written to President Obama to say they believe Israel is preparing to attack Iran this month. The experts describe how Israel's ready for a sudden strike and make it politically impossible for Obama to do anything other than offer full US military support. But Michael Chossudovsky from the Canadian Centre for Research on Globalization thinks that in reality Israel would need Washington's backing first.
Signatories of this memo are very serious and people, and of course this message should be taken very seriously. It is technically, from a military standpoint, impossible for Israel to actually launch a war on Iran without the green light from the United States. We have to understand that this is not strictly an Israeli military project. The United States, since the mid-90s, in fact, has indicated Iran as a possible target. And the war plans, which have been ongoing since 2004, in fact, in the wake of the bombing and invasion of Iraq, have been joint programs, US, NATO, and Israel. So that, in fact, these war plans are already ongoing. It may be convenient for Washington to let Israel unleash the attack. And in fact, Dick Cheney back in 2004 intimated that Israel might do the work for us, so to speak. Iran has 10% of the global oil and gas reserves, 5 times those of the United States. It has tremendous wealth. And ultimately, war in that region is the battle for oil and natural gas. The threat of a war is real. The implications are far-reaching. If that war were launched within the next few months, the whole region would flare up from the eastern Mediterranean right through to the Chinese border.
Now, despite police from the CIA, Pakistan reportedly gave the Chinese access to the crashed United States helicopter in Abbottabad after the raid on Osama bin Laden's compound. Our next guest says this is only the tip of the iceberg. He says the Chinese are stealing valuable U.S. secrets left and right and says this is a real crisis and the U.S. better take notice.
About the tension between the United States and Pakistan. And just today, again, another article came out on Yahoo News just 7 hours ago that the senator said consider military action against Pakistan So it is now elevated. The threat level is much more severe because now they're talking about actually going in and sending troops to Pakistan. As I was mentioning yesterday, the Republican on the Senate Armed Services Committee said Sunday that the U.S. should consider military action against Pakistan if it continues to support terrorist attacks against American troops in Afghanistan. Folks, I don't know if you guys know this, but Pakistan has nuclear weapons. So if the United States is going to go attack Pakistan, there will be nuclear war.
Dr. Lieven, many thanks for joining us. So Pakistan is strengthening ties with China. Why is it seeking a major partner other than the US, do you think?
China and Pakistan have been partners for 40 years now, more than 40 years. Initially, this was motivated above all by mutual hostility to India. Now, in addition, China has a very strong interest in Pakistan as a future energy route from the Persian Gulf to China. So this isn't new. The nuclear element is new, and this is very much a response to America's nuclear deal with India. Because, of course, it's pretty ironic that the United States is now saying that China is threatening the NPT and so forth, because it was America's deal with India which really, well, on top, of course, of America's relations with Israel, which shattered the NPT in that part of the world.
Now, you've mentioned the nuclear deal struck between the US and India some 2 years ago, and China is expected to build 2 nuclear power plants, we now know, in Pakistan. Why else do you think is Washington's reaction to that deal so negative?
Well, it's two things. It's partly, of course, that, yes, there is rivalry for interest, for influence in Pakistan between Beijing and Washington. But it's also, of course, that the United States is very worried about the spread of nuclear energy and nuclear technology in the Muslim world, and especially, of course, in Pakistan, for fear that this might fall into the hands of terrorists.
Russia has reaffirmed it'll take measures if the US and NATO continue with their European missile defense plan without taking Moscow's view on board. The Foreign Ministry says it'll be forced into an, quote, appropriate response. Now, Moscow's been concerned over the alliance's failure to guarantee the project will not threaten Russia's security. Washington has been leading efforts for the missile shield in Europe, saying it'll help to protect the continent from countries like Iran and North Korea. Russia wants an equal part in the project, but there's been little progress so far in reaching a compromise.
We are ready to consider the offer of the Syrian side regarding the purchase of new weaponry. Our position is clear. We are ready to deliver weapons to Syria that are used for defense only.
The sticking point for the United States is Iran's insistence to carry on enriching its own uranium. But U.S. investigative journalist Webster Tarpley says the deal means his country's strategy to isolate Tehran has failed.
This is a bold and intelligent move by Erdogan of Turkey and by Lula of Brazil, and it shows a certain level of rationality also on the part of Ahmadinejad. It's a personal humiliation for Hillary Clinton, and it's really a stunning defeat for the U.S. policy, which has been this constant obsession to isolate Iran, to separate them from any allies or trading partners they might have, and then to beat them over the head with the idea that the international community demands this, that, and the other thing. And now we have Brazil, a huge emerging superpower in Latin America, and Turkey, a very interesting country over the past few years, are essentially breaking the isolation. And it shows that there's something changing in the world. These two countries, Brazil and especially Turkey, are not just sitting there waiting for the U.S. or others to cause chaos with crippling economic sanctions, as Hillary Clinton is always ranting about, or even worse, mayhem with a military attack. So they've seized the initiative, and instead of just sitting there and waiting for somebody else to commit some huge act of historical vandalism, they said, no, we're going to take the initiative and we're going to head this off. We're going to avoid the worst, and I believe that they've done it. So I think the world owes them a vote of thanks.
They're still at it, this new operation called Barbarossa 3. The United States government is building 13 secret bases in Afghanistan as the forward push towards the eventual war against Russia, because that war is simply unavoidable. We're in the end game. The world financial system, is self-destructing as we're seeing it right now. So there's simply not enough time to reach any kind of, diplomatic solution, or to try to cajole the Russians into joining, becoming part of One World Company Limited, because both the Russians and Chinese, simply very different people physically, as far as the Chinese are concerned, and mentally, intellectually, culturally, and historically than anything, related to Europe or the United States. I'm talking about just, the control of, be it shadow masters or people who control the world economics and finance, what their final objectives are. And these objectives, pass through destroying nation-state republics and creating not one world government, but rather One World Company Limited, literally continents or groups of nations behind financial control, which is much more powerful than political control, as we're seeing, for example, in the case of Greece and soon to come other nations such as Spain.
Eyewitness reports suggest around a dozen US warships and aircraft carriers, as well as one Israeli warship, have passed through the Suez Canal, supposedly heading towards the Persian Gulf. If reports are true, the move might be in connection to the US self-inflicted embargo against Iran aimed at inspecting Iran-bound ships for suspected goods related to the country's nuclear program. Reportedly, the USS Harry Truman, along with 12 other accompanying ships, including at least one Israeli vessel, passed through the Suez Canal on Friday, as the Egyptian army made extra security measures for their safe passage. Although Egypt's opposition party reportedly warned President Mubarak not to let the American fleet pass through.
Well, hello, beautiful. You look nervous.